Good morning and welcome to the Eclectic Radical. I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. With me is Connor Exum, author
Hi,
of
everyone.
Leon Trotsky's Revolutionary Substack, and Charles Trahan, a longtime correspondent on Twitter who has expressed some interest in coming on the show. And I'm glad to have you, Charles. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing great.
It's a pretty good morning so far.
Yeah, I'm always great about 2 or 3 hours after I wake up.
Yeah, that seems how it works for me too. It takes me a couple of hours to actually catch up to being awake lately. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I quit the coffee thing. So now, it's just whatever kind of energy I saved up during the night.
I haven't quit the coffee thing. My wife and I are thinking about it again.
Why would you quit the coffee thing?
Well, my wife would quit the coffee thing for religious reasons. She's LDS.
Oh, okay, I got that one.
I would quit the coffee thing because I've always not been completely. The last time I tried to quit coffee, except in the mornings, it didn't make much difference, and so I went back to drinking coffee all the time. But I'm wondering about how the caffeine interacts with my anxiety and my headaches, and if it wouldn't be better to just cut it out entirely and go to the same sort of coffee resembling herbal teas that my wife is trying to switch to.
They say that coffee's good for headaches, though.
It can be.
I don't know.
Caffeine and headaches can have a cyclic relationship as well.
I don't know. I believe in keeping my caffeine content way high.
Well, I did it for 65 years. I finally had to give it up. My stomach just quit handling it for me. Every time I drank, I got an upset stomach, and it was painful.
That's understandable.
But yeah, no, where I grew up, man, in Louisiana, you drink that black dark roast stuff, and they put some hickory in it, and you drink it all day long.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Folgers is trying to get back in touch with their roots and remind people that they're the commercialized bastardization of that Louisiana coffee.
Yeah, I think I protested Folgers one time back in the 80s.
I think every corporation has been protested at least once in the 80s.
It was easy to do.
Nestle is the consistent offender. I mean, somebody's been protesting them since every year since 1950.
Wow.
1950, it was because of the first formula scandal.
Oh, hell, I don't remember that one.
Oh, the first one was they were pushing formula so hard in Africa that
they had major malnutrition issues.
They had major malnutrition issues, and women were drying up and weren't able to breastfeed because they had been convinced to replace breastfeeding almost entirely with formula by the Nestle capitalists. Mm-hmm. The ad campaigns were disgusting.
They claimed all these things, but they didn't realize the water shortages in Africa, and they were reducing the amount and the cost of the formula, and they were reducing the ratio of water to formula mix. So it was just colored water after a while, and the babies were dying.
Yeah,
crazy. But I like the one where they, what was it, about maybe 5 years ago, when they were having the major drought was just starting in California, and they were
drought in California, and they were buying city water in Los Angeles and Sacramento and San Francisco and selling it to their bottled divisions.
And then they were saying that no, we're not going to stop. They were
and on top of all this, they're selling the bottled water as somehow better for you than tap water when it's just the city tap water.
Yeah.
Well, I think they did filter it again.
Yes, they did filter it again, but it's still just the city tap water with one extra round of filtering, Connor.
Oh, I know, but I'm just saying they did filter it again. They did have something for their legal department to say, well, it is a little different. You got that extra layer of reverse osmosis filtering. Come on, people.
Well, the one I'll always remember is when Arrowhead Mountain Spring was they no longer call their water Mountain Spring Water, by the way. Now they're just Arrowhead. When Arrowhead Mountain Spring Water got caught buying Los Angeles city water when they were promising everybody, no, this is the real stuff from Lake Arrowhead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's like all those sweetened juices, that were clear and they had a very light, fruity flavor. Calistoga, I think, is the name of one I remember.
Yes, Calistoga, the sparkling water outfit.
Yeah. But they claim to get their water somewhere unique.
Oh, they all do. They all do. If you read the packages used to all say, bottled from the source high in the mountains of
right. It's like where all your herbs are picked, right?
Yeah, it turns out it was always somebody's public water system that they were using because they just couldn't bottle enough from any of those sources.
Yeah, no, there's this expensive bottled water brand. No, I'm sorry, canned water brand here called Liquid Death. Pure spring water. And I don't know why they call it Liquid Death, except that someone thinks it's cool. Maybe because they don't sterilize it and they can't promise there aren't microbes in it.
Well, there's another reason why. Because if you had truly pure water, it would dissolve your body.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So maybe that's what they're trying to get to, right?
Maybe. But anyway, so they call us Liquid Death, and supposedly every can, the water comes from the heart of an iceberg from a mountain somewhere. And it's like, are you sure about that? This is the global warming era where all this stuff is melting. Are you really out there harvesting the hearts of icebergs?
The hearts, right? They waste all the rest, just that core.
Just get that core of the iceberg for bottled water. It makes one wonder.
That's like 200,000 years old, right?
You can buy the part that's not the heart of the iceberg from Arrowhead.
Isn't that the part that just dribbles down into the water system and then you find at your tap?
Yeah. Carries a few rocks down to the ocean.
That's a good marketing one. Fiji tried that. Fiji Water tried to claim that they were the purest water, and then they found microplastics in it. And that
well, there's microplastics in everything. If you can't, if we don't accept, if we accept that there's microplastics in everything, Fiji still might be the purest water.
Just with that little caveat, little asterisk.
Purest available in modern human conditions under the Holocene.
That's right. So that's true again, but it doesn't sound as good. That just doesn't roll off the tongue like pure jungle rainwater, And then a little picture of one of those little macaque monkeys.
I remember the 1980s when pure gentle rainwater was tearing the walls off of buildings because of the acid content.
But didn't Reagan say that wasn't such a big deal, so we shouldn't worry about it?
Reagan said that, but the EPA seemed to really care about actually cleaning it up in a way they haven't about anything else since.
I guess because they realized that, that contaminated rainwater went from old Pittsburgh areas where it was formed to their cute home out.
Well, and that's really the thing. You started seeing acid rain in places like Southern California.
That's what I don't understand about all the anti-environmentalists. They think and the Libertarian Party especially, they're like, oh no, it's just going to stay right there, right? So if it's contaminated, it's okay. It's my land. It doesn't matter that I dump, PCBs on it or something else. It's not going to go anywhere.
Well, so, there are ways to make that true, but they involve owning caves that are all on indigenous land, and the indigenous people there have been very clear they don't want the radioactive waste buried there anymore. It makes them nervous.
Because it doesn't stay there, right? Because even if the cave is really good, right, you could still have tremors and stuff that causes fissures.
Hey, the American Southwest is not that far from the San Andreas Fault over in California.
No, not at all. And another problem with that sort of thing is that the companies that are trying to sell you all these lines are also purposely using the money you give them to talk you into nonsense to buy more stuff from them. It's crazy. It's kind of crazy thinking.
Well, have you seen Sweden's solution? They want to go into all their granite mines, and the cost is like billions, trillions of dollars to make these vaults for nuclear waste that they plan on using. And well, what do you do with it? I mean, it's got a 50,000-year half-life. I mean,
but here's a question for you, even beyond everything else. I'm going to turn it this way because it's something that too many people who are pro-nuclear don't think about. Where does the uranium come from?
Oh, well, you have to mine it.
And where do they mine uranium?
Well, I mean,
mostly on Indian land.
Utah.
That's one place in the U.S. A lot of those sources have dried up.
Peru has a huge deposit of it they know of.
Peru has a huge deposit of it. And isn't it funny that the left-wing president of Peru got overthrown by his vice president who decided to join the right-wingers?
Hey, well, yellow cake uranium is a hell of a commodity.
But let me give you another example. I'll be more specific. So France
they have it.
Has gone into big business exporting nuclear power to Germany because Germany's been in an energy crisis ever since shit in Ukraine started interfering with their normal sources, which would be Ukraine or Russia. But now there's a war that's stopping all their normal sources from getting to them. And of course, the pipeline was blown up.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
so where do the French get the uranium?
They get it from Africa.
Yes. The French get almost all of it from Niger.
Is no one getting their uranium from Europe anymore?
I don't think they've ever gotten their uranium from Europe.
Europe has had very small deposits of it. Nothing that can be exploited commercially and effectively. It's just too cost prohibitive for the amount that they have.
And so, of course, the United States, being the United States, exploits its own uranium and tries to control the foreign deposits that its French and British allies don't already control.
Well, that, and we've been trying very hard to keep. I mean, why do you think we're so excited about Argentina going to Javier Milei? Because that's got like 20% of the world's lithium deposits right now.
Yes.
And lithium right now is running somewhere around 41,000 a ton.
It's ironic.
Mm-hmm. So we want to dump that price way down, and he's the only idiot that we can find.
What's really ironic is that Javier Milei is a white supremacist and a supporter of some of the more offensive right-wing things to happen in the history of Argentina's right-wing regimes. And yet, his role in history is going to be to prove to the Argentinians that nobody in the global north actually believes they're white.
Oh, I don't know about that. He's going to be. They're
going to be plundered for their resources like any other Latin American country,
sure
and they're not going to be able to hide behind Argentine privilege anymore.
I don't know about that. There's always that 5%, right, that goes along with these groups, and they're always the whitest. They're always the guys that can prove that, like, they're second generation, like he's like second generation Italian, Argentinian.
Yeah.
And there's always some group that's there. They don't ever really get to be fully in the white club because they're Argentinian, but they're much more close to it than anyone else in the country is.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing. The Argentinians have scrupulously maintained their national whiteness to a shocking degree and with really awful policies in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
They ethnically cleansed the freed slaves out of Argentina after ending slavery in Argentina. That's why you don't see That's why you don't see black Argentinians very much.
Yeah, unlike Brazil.
Unlike Brazil, exactly, or most other countries in Latin America, for that matter.
But Brazil had a much higher slave population.
Well, but Brazil had the highest slave population because of the nature of the Brazilian economy. Brazil also. And this is horrible to say in this modern age, but it makes sense when you look at how republicanism has been going in the United States, too. Brazil is the only country in the world that ever became less liberal after throwing out their monarchy.
I don't know about that.
No, because their monarchy. The emperor was the guy who went out of his way to free the slaves.
Well,
the emperor was the guy who went out of the way to introduce constitutional government, mostly because he was worried about the fact that he didn't have a successor who would be as effective at emperoring as he was.
No, I was just saying.
So he felt a constitutional government was preferable to a shitty emperor.
Well, what I was saying is that I think that we can make one more country that threw out their monarchy and actually became worse, and that would be Germany.
Well, that's a good point.
With the Weimar. That was
but you know, there were extremely good intentions in early Weimar.
Until about 1933.
Well, I mean, no, it broke down even before that. I mean, ultimately, Friedrich Ebert was the worst class traitor in the history of social democracy.
That's true. But I was just saying that's when it really broke down.
But the problem is that Friedrich Ebert, despite being a so-called democratic socialist, when elected president, immediately became all about winning the respect of the world for the German Republic and maintaining a politically stable state.
Mm-hmm.
Because all these things were in the long run more important to the socialist revolution than actually letting poor people eat now.
Yeah, I mean, you also have to remember that, unfortunately for the Germans, the British and the French, especially the French, were putting a huge crushing blow on their economy at that early stage. And and no one could pull out of that. They engineered a system that you just couldn't make anything but inflation.
The Germans had their chance. The German socialists had their chance at a real revolution, and they gave it to the Weimar folks instead, and that is disappointing. It's true.
Yeah, but look at 1919 in the Ruhr Valley. In the Ruhr Valley, they had multiple strikes on the socialist side.
Yes, they did,
and they were violently put down, like summarily executed in the streets.
And then, ironically, in 1920,
mm-hmm.
when the right wing takes over in the cap push.
Mm-hmm.
They go out in the streets and they appeal to the trade unions to save them with a general strike, and the trade unions do it.
Yeah. But that's what we're seeing right now. Let's take the Amazon strike. Why isn't that getting any press to speak of?
Because it's not the right kind of union. Let's remember, number one, that the Teamsters didn't endorse either candidate, and their president spoke at the RNC. That's why it's not in the media.
Oh, that's a big part of it.
They're being punished.
There's no doubt about that they're getting the and then that was foolish to talk to Trump as if he's going to be some kind of massive labor-friendly guy. So
I have two ways of thinking about it, and I want to know what Charles thinks too about this. But number one, we have as everybody on the liberal side loves to scream at us, we have a two-party system. And that if the liberals are telling the truth and political democracy is under the current system is the only way to do anything, then that means that if you're not getting what you need from the Democrats, your only meaningful option is to engage with the Republicans, and vice versa. The reason for this fact is why billionaires give money to both parties.
Yeah.
And with this in mind, and this is where I'm curious about what Charles thinks too, I think the only thing you can do if you're the president of the Teamsters and you're not getting what you want from the Democrats is to at least approach the Republicans and make some sort of demand too. I'm not saying you'll get what you want or that anything good is going to come of it in this media state, but if we were actually really the sort of two-party system that we're supposed to believe we are, that's the obvious move. If you're not getting what you want from one party, go to the other. I mean, remember, prohibition was passed by a single interest group, getting every candidate from both parties to sign on to their platform in order to get their endorsement. What do you think? Is there really any point, Charles, in pretending to engage with the Republicans? Or, I mean, you have to try, you have to just break out? What do you do?
Well, in my way of thinking, it depends on if you want political change or not.
It's true.
That's not going to happen with the two-party system in this country right now. Not anyway easily, because we're not going to be happy long under the GOP or the Dems.
Of course.
Then you're going to go to the other party. And then when they've had their little turn, you're going to go back to the other party. And allegiances and people trade sides and what. Man, I've been voting third party since I was, 24, 25, I guess. And I voted for some really bad people. Because I would rather vote for a really bad person than vote for one of the two parties that never seemed to change much for me. I became a Democrat in 2014, I think it was, really, to help a buddy of mine because he wanted to run for Congress, and he asked me to be his manager on the road. And so I hesitantly agreed to, and then changed my mind in about 3 or 4 weeks. It's a place I can't stay long. In my mind anyway, and it's probably not true for all, but it seems to me like there was a lot of self-grooming going on. It's like, who's going to be our director of intelligence under Trump?
Well, the nominee is Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, last time I heard from her, she was a Democrat.
Now, there's a funny story there, and the mainstream media is not doing it justice because they're stuck into Russiagate narratives still. They're doing it a little bit of justice. They're starting to talk about the cult to a degree that they never used to talk about it in the regular media. That's an improvement. That's good. Yeah. The cult and her history as a queer basher matters a lot more than the Russiagate stuff. But they're still tying into these, well, she met with Assad and she met with al-Sisi, and it's like they're trying to criticize Tulsi Gabbard for meeting with the president of Egypt, who was put in power by a U.S.-assisted coup, because Russia also likes the strongman of Egypt, because they also hate the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, I mean, she's got a lot of questionable.
So here's my problem with Tulsi Gabbard, and it has nothing to do with the she's a Russian asset panic, or well, she's not really qualified, she's just a mid-level National Guard officer panic. She's too qualified. She spent an unknown amount of time working for unknown military operations connected to AFRICOM while she was in Congress.
Technically.
So what was she do? I want to know what she was doing for AFRICOM. And I want to know why everybody thinks someone who is involved in black ops in Africa for AFRICOM is somehow anti-imperialist or anti-war.
I mean, it's interesting to know what she's doing there, but I mean, she is technically a nurse. I mean, that's what she is.
She's technically a medic, but I mean, it doesn't matter what she technically is. AFRICOM does not send people to, say, Niger for humanitarian reasons.
Well, no, she's not there for humanitarian reasons, but she could be operating a field hospital too. I mean,
she is a combat medic.
She's a combat nurse. Is she a medic?
She's not a nurse. She is a medic. She is a combat paramedic.
Yeah, but she's a lieutenant colonel now, so she's
she's a lieutenant colonel now, which means she's and I don't know if she is still in any sort of medical connection. There's no way to
I mean, if she's a combat medic, I mean, if she's following the normal chain of command, she would be
Well, people
somewhere.
transfer.
She could transfer.
People in
yes.
the military transfer,
But
and
I'm just
sometimes
saying,
when you get a promotion, you transfer somewhere else because of the promotion.
Sometimes, but not usually too much out of your MOS like that. I mean, you wouldn't. So she's probably still in the medical field. I don't know what she's doing in
AFRICOM. But if she's doing it for AFRICOM, it's connected to deeply amoral shit and not giving information to Russia stuff.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, they're not going to put
The problem isn't that she's a Russian asset. The problem is that as recently as 2019, 2020, 2021, she was an active operative of the deep state in the empire.
I don't disagree with any of that. I'm just saying that I don't see where she fits in. I mean, she's clearly not going out on missions and whacking people for AFRICOM. I mean, she doesn't seem like she has the qualifications to be an intelligence officer, which is the other option there. So
but see, that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. On paper, Pete Buttigieg doesn't look like he has the qualifications to be an intelligence officer, and he was only actually in naval intelligence for like 18 months. But if you look at everything he did for McKinsey after and before, you realize he's probably a CIA asset from the beginning, and the naval intelligence gig was just an official cover sort of thing that they could put together.
I don't know, Charles. You were in the Navy. What do you think?
Well, I think that my position in the Navy is part of what founded my dislike of American politics after I got out. And it's not because I didn't enjoy the people I was around in the Navy and stuff like that. It's the military is not conducive for being your own person whatsoever. I mean, I went to captain's mast 4 times in 4 years. How I escaped with an honorable discharge is beyond my way of knowing.
Well,
I was I was not a good boy as far as the military was concerned. And inside the military, there was not a lot of room for politics at the enlisted man's level, which is where I was.
Well, I'm just saying, but I mean, Buttigieg got there. He went through the loophole, right? I mean, there's this.
Well, he was. I mean, let's be honest. Buttigieg fits a certain profile from a background for recruitment while at Harvard.
Yeah, but he didn't even get there, right? I mean, he went through so the armed services has this crazy loophole, right?
Yes.
Where, if you know a guy, you can bypass.
Yes.
All your basic training, all of this stuff, and then they put you as an officer. It's essentially just, we're picking the rich kids and the kids from political families who want to have a military career and look like they're doing something for the next step in their political.
Well, in this case, it's fairly simple, and I'm going to be blunt about it because it fits what I would call the original 1940s CIA profile.
Well,
which is that Buttigieg was a kid whose father was a quote unquote known comsimp, which meant as a result that his name would allow him to talk to certain people who otherwise he would not be able to talk to. At least that's the theory when you recruit such a person. He was also tapped for the Ivy League elite academically at a young age. That combination means he was probably approached by someone from the CIA in Harvard. He was probably recruited while in college. He probably did training that was covered up in some nice, fancy, hunky-dory way.
Management training, they call it that.
Management training, vacations, workshops, whatever. And then he went to work for McKinsey after he graduated. And it was while he was working for McKinsey, which is what I would call, for those people who watch spy movies, a non-official code, a non-official cover, a knock for Mission Impossible fans.
Mm-hmm.
And then while working with McKinsey, he suddenly does an 18-month hitch as a naval intelligence officer in Afghanistan, and then disappears from military service again.
He went into the reserves after that, and he spends like another, I don't know, it's usually a 6-year hitch total. But it's not clear what he did for the next 5.5 years.
Exactly. He's in the reserves, but we don't know what he did. Though, of course, I'm not someone people should necessarily believe, because my favorite conspiracy theory is still that Hunter Biden is the James Bond of Ukraine.
Well, there's something not right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't go in, get jobs at major gas companies.
Well, there's
$80,000 a month.
So there's
after Charles. Your father says something like, "Well, I'm not sure I like this situation too much here in Ukraine." I mean, that screams soft corruption.
I mean, definitely. At the very least, it's always soft corruption when a foreign government gives an American politician's kid a position on a board of directors. That's just how it is.
Or a building.
Yeah.
Oh, your building's bankrupt? Here's $2 billion for 666 Broadway.
Yeah.
Did Pete ever win an election on his own anywhere?
Yes.
Mayor of South
Bend, Indiana.
Right.
Yeah, he's the mayor of Notre Dame.
Where his father taught.
I didn't think he had it in him.
Where his father
But he's lost everything since then. He didn't even win re-election. Well, no, he was term limited out, and he had no prospects for state office in Indiana, because only Republicans win state office in Indiana. So his only way to have any sort of political career was to be appointed to something by a Democratic president. So he had to run for president.
So it's amazing to me, and let me know what you think about this, guys. How many people we have that are making major decisions about how we live and get along in this country and then through our daily lives, who are just not elected officials. They're appointed, they have contacts from other places, they're insiders in many, many ways that you and I probably don't even know.
And one more level, too, which is that every time the government abdicates responsibility for something, so-called small government, every time the government says this isn't any of our business, what that means is now unelected corporate executives get to decide how people interact in that sphere of life.
Hey, damn right, because someone's going to take the responsibility because they want the stroke.
And then it becomes corporate government, and that's our choice. Some sort of popular government that we can control in some way, or unelected corporate government that seeks to control us by every means possible.
Yeah. Hell, I'm not even a big fan of government, but but I like them a little better than I like corporations.
I think what we have to do is we have to worry more now about the role of social media. When a billionaire with 200 million followers on Twitter can say, "I don't like X, get rid of it," then we've lost a lot of our democratic power. And that's more troubling to me than a lot of things right now.
The most troubling thing about social media right now is not Elon Musk, though Elon Musk is a symptom. The most troubling thing about social media right now is, number one, billionaire control, regardless of who the billionaire is.
Oh, yeah, I agree with
YouTube is controlled by Google.
But I'm just saying that he's the most vocal, and he's using
he's the most obvious right now. But, when Trump was president the first time, it was Mark Zuckerberg who was getting all the fire.
Yeah, but Mark Zuckerberg, he never openly went out and said, like, hey, I don't really like this part of government.
Mark Zuckerberg was not the media magnet that Elon wants to be.
He was smarter about it, which is more scary, because he's like, oh, wait, I got a company over here that can just magnify this message very quietly, and I can just pretend like it's not my fault.
Mm-hmm.
But
whereas Elon's blatantly pushing an agenda hard.
Oh yeah.
No, and that makes a difference too. But it's really worth noticing that our system only ever talks about one billionaire at a time and makes them the bad guy.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because
Reid Hoffman donated, who's worth $80 billion.
Is he worth 80? I thought it was only 4.
No, Reid Hoffman's worth $80 billion now. Inflation. All the billionaires got massively richer from COVID.
They did, but LinkedIn is LinkedIn's the joke of social media.
But that's the thing, is that it's not your primary thing. It's all your other investments.
True.
Because, if you look at the value of Tesla, Tesla is not why Elon Musk is rich. Elon Musk is rich, number one, because he was forced to sell his PayPal stock, which just naturally made him rich at the time.
Yeah.
Which is the funniest, the most classic example of failing up ever.
Yeah,
be such a failure as CEO of the company that they not only fire you as CEO, but force you to sell all of your stock and throw you out of the company entirely. But the downside of this classic worst ever failure is that he's now like one of these huge billionaires whose money can't be ignored, and he has so much more power than he did before he failed as PayPal CEO.
Well,
and then he invested that money in a bunch of other things. And those investments have paid off because, like Donald Trump, he's a guy who knows when to cut and run.
Well, he got lucky in a lot of it. With Tesla, the company wasn't profitable for decades unless he sold his stock option. He sold his tax receipts to people that allowed them to take those fungible tax dodges that Nevada gave them and federal court and the feds gave them, and that's what MGM was buying more of those than anything else at one point because they were so profitable.
Yes,
that they didn't want to spend any tax money in Nevada, and he sold them a whole bunch. And for years, that's the only reason why he ever had a profit margin. But he's been brilliant at selling the idea that he's building a new future and all these.
I don't want to say brilliant at selling the idea. He has put a lot of money into recruiting media to sell the idea for him.
Oh yeah, but still pretty brilliant idea, right?
Kara Swisher used to be a serious Elon Musk groupie.
Mm-hmm.
She's not the only person in tech who used to be a serious Elon Musk groupie until relatively recently. There are whole industries, there are whole media sectors in tech that basically appear to just be shadow puppets for Elon Musk and or Peter Thiel.
Oh yeah.
There's one online tech magazine that I was researching a little bit because they have a Tesla reporter whose job is primarily to report on Elon Musk, and whose reporting on Elon Musk is universally positive. And I'm not going to name them because I don't want to drive traffic to them. But as near as I could tell, their other content is like bare bones slapped together stuff, and all their real content is their positive puff pieces on Musk. This is not a real tech magazine. This is a front for Elon Musk's PR outfit.
Oh, sure. But it's still a brilliant operation he's pulling.
Oh, well, but I'm just saying is that it's easy to be brilliant that way if you have the money to do it.
Sure, yeah. If you have the money to do it, it makes it a hell of a lot easier. But even when he didn't have the money, think of all the times that CNN used to have him on for Elon Musk buys a new hypercar. And they really did have this. I've seen the segment.
Well, no, I know, but it's because he was investing that money and meeting the right people and basically, being an unbilled commercial sponsor.
Sure.
He was breaking all sorts of rules and they were bending all sorts of rules for him.
Sure, but I'm just saying that, our media has been
it's ironic. Our quote unquote liberal media created both Elon Musk and Donald Trump in very much the same ways.
Well, they had help.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. It's an amazing thing about a guy like Elon, when he bought out Twitter. I thought it was the worst thing for this country ever. I'm not sure it's anywhere near that bad, but it could still well turn out to be that bad.
So, as a creator,
like you said, you can't follow the own people you follow anymore and hear from them.
This is what I'm talking about. This is why I'm saying Elon is just a symptom, because this had actually started in little ways a little bit before the buyout, though it really started to become obvious in big ways after the buyout. But the way the internet works has been changing since about 2021, 2022, where in 2020, Twitter acted as a magnet for the media that you wanted to see. You followed the right people, you plugged into the right algorithms, you stayed really on top of the news, and you got really good news feeds from really good sources. And on top of that, the Twitter news section wasn't just a crappy bunch of hashtags like it is now.
Oh, yeah. And in 2015, Twitter was even better.
I believe it.
Yeah.
But in 2020, I was able to stay on top of the news. I was able to tell people what was going on very quickly because I could read everything very quickly. Now I have to do much more research. I have to talk to many more sources about many more things.
You got to double check everything.
I have to double check everything. And most importantly, fewer people also see what I put out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well,
and I have a following on Twitter. Trying to build a new following organically on other places like Blue Sky or Substack is much more difficult than it was to build a following organically on Twitter in 2019.
I can believe that.
Substack's not designed to build following unless you basically pay. You're one of their paid operatives.
I call them, discovery on Substack is very difficult.
I call them operatives because that's what they are. I mean, they're the Matt Taibbi's and those people are there too.
Well, there are a few good people in that category too who are doing good work, who have sort of gotten in on that.
I'm not saying that they're not good people. I'm just saying, but they already have, a following in the outside world.
And they're able to leverage their own following into a following on Substack. No, exactly.
Well, you used to be able to follow even like authors you liked and scientists you enjoyed. And
this is something that I noticed when I started writing on Substack. Every time I wrote something, I would get like 5 or 10 new followers or subscribers. Now, it's almost not worth writing anything on Substack and just streaming the pod and just running the podcast there, because I'm lucky to get one new follower subscriber from a post.
Well, they changed the followers for some odd reason. I had like 300 followers at one point, and all of a sudden I'm down to like 59. But a lot of them are bots.
There's a lot of weird stuff going on,
and that's everywhere.
And there are trolls starting to show up on Substack harassing people now, like Twitter. And we're seeing Blue Sky's plan is to become Twitter. They want to monetize in exactly the way Elon Musk is monetizing, which is not happy news for all the people who went to Blue Sky searching for something better than Twitter. Their plan is to follow Elon Musk's blueprint for Twitter. With a step further, they basically want it to be set up in such a way that you and I, as creators, would monetize our accounts with Blue Sky in the way Twitter monetizes their accounts.
Well,
all the payments would come through Blue Sky, and all the money would be distributed to us through Blue Sky, with Blue Sky taking its cut of everything.
Well, of course. I mean, Substack does that already.
But that and Patreon does that already.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is
Sounds
Blue
like
Sky is not
journalism.
trying to step into the gap created by Twitter. Blue Sky is trying to immediately follow in Twitter's footsteps and to become everything and immediately compete with Substack and Patreon, which is to mention Matt Taibbi. Mm-hmm. Matt Taibbi's status as an operative of Substack lost him Elon Musk's favor and his position as an operative of Twitter.
That's true. But I think he was done with him anyway.
I think that Matt Taibbi really didn't want to be done. I think Matt Taibbi really thought that he and Elon Musk were buddies.
Oh, I think that. But I think that Elon Musk was done with him.
Yes, I agree. Elon Musk had clearly left Matt Taibbi behind and chosen Barry Weiss.
Yeah, but even Barry Weiss isn't, Elon realized.
Not Barry personally, but her free press platform is one of the very privileged groups on Twitter, one of the very privileged accounts on Twitter.
I think more importantly, he saw that he could fill that gap himself.
Oh, certainly.
After a while, he no longer needed, the outside press to validate him. He's become his own, he just makes a statement and people say, oh, it's true.
He's become a self-validating machine.
Yeah. Well, this whole monetizing thing has gotten, in my mind, peculiar anyway. You guys, there was an online writing thing. I forget their name now. But anyway, you could go to them, you could write short stories and poems and put them up, and people would read them and comment. And
Medium,
that's it, by God. And then, so I was on Medium for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, because I write poetry, and I like to get it out in front of people once in a while. But they started asking money for everything. Mm-hmm. Or they started putting conditions upon people who had to review it or whatever. So, I basically got out of them after a while. But I haven't found another platform that is not trying to make money off of providing a service, but make their money from people who want to advertise on their service. Well, I don't mind as much as collecting money from the guy who, might write 100 poems in his lifetime and make $50 off of them.
The reason I'm on YouTube is because YouTube makes money off advertising and not me.
Yep.
The advertising may or may not make money off me, and I have no plans to monetize my YouTube account. The reason that I went with Patreon specifically, even though they are trying to make money off of me, is because Patreon is an easy place for people to pay me.
Yep.
It also happens to plug into payment tools that make it easy for me to access that money to pay for the expenses of this show.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I use Patreon.
Even I donated through Patreon once or twice.
Yeah. The reason I haven't monetized my Substack is because to monetize the Substack, unless I totally misread something going through their system, you have to set up an account with a specific banking entity that they do everything through, and that banking entity then controls all of your access to your Substack money. I am not willing to provide a dedicated account to a bank I've never done business with before, just to allow Substack to become another revenue stream.
Yeah, I can't
You're absolutely
that. They already know enough of our info to own us.
You are absolutely correct about the fact that they have a specific bank, which they're taking 5 to 10% off of every transaction that comes your way.
Yeah.
Plus, I just refuse to.
They're going to take. Somebody's going to take a percentage anyway. It's no matter what. I understand that. That's how it works when someone's processing payments for you. They're going to take their percentage. That's the capitalist world we live in. Fine. I'm stuck with that if I want to give people a way to pay me for my work. That said, for all its flaws, I do what I do on Patreon because I can make stuff free that's accessible to everyone if I want. I can link stuff there easily because of the way their platform works. It's very friendly for linking in other websites. It's the only platform that is that friendly for linking in other websites. So that's my biggest reason for still staying with Patreon, is it's the only platform that is still that friendly to linking in other websites.
Yeah, well,
you can create a link to your content somewhere else as a post on your Patreon page in a way you cannot on Twitter or Substack.
Well, Twitter's gone crazy.
Twitter's gone crazy. I can't even stream to Twitter anymore unless I'm willing to pay Elon Musk, which is why you can't watch my show on Twitter anymore, which is depressing to me because the majority of my viewers were on Twitter.
Yeah, I tried to get my wife on Twitter line this morning with the smart TV to watch live, but you're not there.
No, I used to be on Twitter, but I can't stream to Twitter anymore because I won't pay. I did a few polls to see what people thought about me paying for a Twitter account, and funnily enough, my audience is not a big fan of giving money to Elon Musk. And, I can't blame them. And I'm willing to be democratic in this area.
Yeah, I think if most of your followers were wanting you to do that kind of thing,
if my followers,
they would be following Trump or somebody.
Well, no, because I know people who do pay for Twitter to support their accounts, and their followers are supportive of that. But they're more liberal leaning than I am, and some of them have given up on it because they don't want to give Musk their money anymore either.
Yeah. Well, Elon Musk certainly has a lot of our money.
Well, Elon Musk deliberately moved from California to Texas, one of his factories from California to Texas in 2020, so that he could keep getting more of our money without having to shut that factory down for employee safety.
Yeah, well.
Wow. Man, I haven't lived in Texas in a long time. I bet I wouldn't recognize the place.
It depends. Which part of Texas?
I lived in San Antonio, Austin, and Dallas.
Well, Austin is like the Silicon Valley now.
Yeah, it was getting that way when I left. That was a long time ago, though. 3M had just moved out there. And
Austin is, if I had to describe Austin as anything now, it would be Portland in Texas.
Really?
Yeah, Portland, Oregon in Texas. Portland, Oregon, but with country music instead of grunge.
Austin was such a great city to live in at one time.
People say parts of it still are.
Maybe so.
But at the same time, it's been tremendously, like everywhere, it's been tremendously gentrified.
Oh, yeah, big time. Yeah, places I used to ride out to, that's way out of town back when I lived there. Hell, they're all developed now. There's no wide rolling hill country that you can easily get to without going for an hour and a half drive instead of 30 minutes. Just it's not there.
I don't know. I haven't been to.
Well, just since I've been here, 2-3 years after I moved to Oregon, 4 tops, there was a deal cut between the city of Beaverton and the county of Washington County for Beaverton to very rapidly fill up a massive amount of its growth allowance. And all of that land went from being farmland to retail spaces very quickly.
Yeah.
And during this rapid conversion, they opened like 4 new Fuddruckers restaurants, all of which are closed now.
Oh, they're all closed?
All 4 of the new Fuddruckers that were opened as part of this expansion of Beaverton out of business.
Maybe the original one's still open. I used to love
there are still some, I believe there are still some Fuddruckers around. There may even still be one Fuddrucker somewhere around here in Oregon. But they had opened a bunch of new Fuddruckers very specifically as part of that expansion of the Beaverton city limits. And all those new stores went out of business in less than 5 years.
Hey, maybe this whole trend of working from home instead of having to run to the office will help clear some of this stuff up.
I wish it would. One of the big funny things is, you remember how the media started running all those stories about how working from home was bad for companies and companies needed to stop? It turns out that there's a whole bunch of investment in empty corporate real estate that's not making any money, and that they want, and that it's good for the economy if more people go into the office so that more companies are paying more rent.
San Francisco.
Sure. And I bet Exxon will like it too, because you got to drive further.
Yeah, San Francisco, 40% of San Francisco's retail space is vacant.
Oh my God.
That was the reason why they were pushing it so hard.
And these people in San Francisco are pushing these ridiculous YIMBY housing plans that would build luxury condos, when all they need to do is take a few of these empty retail spaces, make some very minor modifications to run livable plumbing and utilities, and convert them into real affordable housing owned by the state and open to anyone.
Well, the other problem with San Francisco is that they've been taken over by Silicon Valley, and all of the so-called studies on poverty are done by these big Silicon Valley groups. And
it's worse than that.
And they always come up with the same solution. They're like, you can go to your car. That they like their cars better because they can live next to their same neighborhood. It's like, no, they live in their car because you kicked them off the street and you kicked them out of their homes.
Yeah.
Idiot. I mean, it's not because they decided that the car was better than Section 8 housing. It's that you didn't have enough of that.
Or you had too long of a waiting list, or too many onerous, because that's the horrible thing, is that the Section 8 waiting list is often waiting lists for vacancies that are vacant right now. Mm-hmm. And the reason there's a waiting list is because
private owners,
ridiculous requirements by private owners.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's the reason why you have it. It's not because they love living in their cars. I mean, like the idiot who does what is that that HR company that just went all AI out of San Francisco. He spent $10 million to go fund some study that basically told you that poor people like their cars because that was the last thing you left them.
Well, the new incoming mayor of San Francisco is a man named Daniel Lurie.
Uh-huh.
Daniel Lurie is one of the heirs to the Levi Strauss fortune.
Yes, he is.
He is not one of the core partners, but one of the affiliated investors in a Silicon Valley venture capital firm called Y Combinator.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Y Combinator's CEO is a not quite billionaire. No, I'm sorry, low-level billionaire named Gary Tan.
It used to be another low-level billionaire named Sam Altman.
Yes. Sam Altman was fired from his Y Combinator CEO job. That's another one of these failing up sort of situations.
Was he fired, or was he asked, or did he leave? I mean, he tells the story that he left because
it's one of those things where he was fired in such a situation that he was allowed to save face by saying that he left.
I wasn't sure what happened because his story, because I've heard
it's one of those very special firings that happens when you make the right deal on your way out because you promise to burn other people down with you.
Yeah. He also has a collection of bunkers supposedly and machine guns because he's waiting for the apocalypse that his AI is going to create.
Well, the most disgusting thing ever is that, there are a bunch of Congress people here in Oregon who were elected by Sam Bankman-Fried's super PAC. And, Sam Bankman-Fried has turned out to be a total snake oil salesman.
Oh, what do you mean? He got us that great guy Maxwell Frost down in Florida.
Yes, he did.
Bought and paid for that guy, and that guy's been quiet ever since Friedman has gone off to jail.
But all these Sam Bankman-Fried, all these Sam Bankman-Fried crypto bought and paid for Congress people are just waiting to sell out to Elon.
Oh, hell yeah.
They've just, crypto's gotten even bigger now in Congress.
Well, that's because crypto's gotten huge in Congress. Elon was basically behind the DeSantis campaign as a huge bailout for crypto. Mm-hmm. Elon's interest in the Trump campaign is making it a huge bailout for crypto and him personally.
Well, he definitely wants to push the Dogecoin back into existence.
Yeah, but I do really have to agree with Gil Duran from FrameLab that we should use the Doge acronym, but we should remember that it stands for destruction of government by Elon.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's what it's about. It is not about making anything more efficient. It is about destroying government and replacing it with absolutely inefficient public-private partnerships that make billionaires ridiculous amounts of money off inferior services that the government was already doing better for less.
That's true. And you have to also laugh. Did you see the new interview that Fetterman just gave?
I have not. I need to know about this because I'm sure that it's pro-Trump and pro-Elon and totally Nazi.
It is.
Of course.
From the clip I saw, he tells that you have to respect Trump because he knows how to play politics. This guy literally said in one of his rallies, I hated paying overtime. All these guys hate paying overtime. Here's how we used to get out of it. That wasn't political. It's just that he's got a cult following. He could say, I like eating cats. And they would say, well, that's okay for him to eat cats.
Well, there's always a point where people reach their limit. Because Kristi Noem, and let's face it, Republicans are some bloodthirsty people who like shooting some critters.
That's true. I know.
Republicans rejected Kristi Noem over the puppy and the goat.
Well, but because they're puppies and goats, right? They're cute, fluffy ones, right? If she had said that she was like shooting like manly things, like wild tigers out in the Serengeti, would have been aces.
She also admitted to not hitting the goat clean, and people are like, "Well, I can't support a vice president who can't shoot straight."
That's true. I can't abide by a poor shot. Happens all.
And she didn't have a second shell ready. She had to go back in for a second shell. So she's a bad shot, but she's overconfident.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed is no matter what kind of hunting you do, there's a large number of people out there who don't like you hunting.
Well,
there's a large number of people who don't like hunting, and they don't like hunting for a variety of reasons, some of which I understand and some of which I think are none of their business. But I will say, and this is in terms of British and not American politics, but sometimes issues like hunting can be surprisingly controversial. Both Brian May of Queen and Eric Clapton completely changed their political orientation because of their views on fox hunting. Brian May went from being a diehard Tory to a Lib Dem because he was anti-fox hunting and thought it was just cruel and unusual and brutal. And Eric Clapton is a member of their Royal Sports Society who became a diehard Tory after having been kind of a Labor guy because he was just so diehard against the fox hunting ban. So the strangest things are important to people who have enough money to care about things other than money.
Well, I have to say that losing Eric Clapton to the Tories probably was more.
Losing Eric Clapton to the Tories was probably inevitable anyway for a bunch of other reasons.
Because
he was going back home. He had been an Enoch Powell guy.
Yeah, he did enjoy white supremacy a little too much.
Yeah, that's the weird thing, though. People single him out.
But David Bowie might have been.
But that whole year, there was a running series of scandals. Eric Clapton, Susie Sue, David Bowie, and like 5 or 10 less famous people that you wouldn't know of today were all caught with these call-outs to white supremacists. And the only one people ever actually talk about in a he's a bad guy sense is Clapton. You saw some of it when David Bowie died, but nobody ever called out David Bowie for his whole career for that shit the way they did Clapton. And it's clear favoritism because Bowie's politics were perceived to be better than Clapton's in ways that had nothing to do with the white supremacist call out.
That's probably because they also thought that David Bowie was gay.
Yes, I think they did.
So they felt that, he was more on the left already.
Which is not always true, as Pete Buttigieg has shown everyone.
That's right. Or that guy Rick Santos from Long Island in New York. George Santos, yeah.
Was he? I don't want to say anything if he's not actually out. Is he?
He's out.
Okay, that's what I didn't want to say anything.
He's out. But I mean, he was great. I mean, he hated everybody, including himself.
So, fun fact, because I'm familiar. I'm actually familiar with George Santos District on a certain level. I know a few people in it. In 2020. That district was held by a congressman named Tom Swatsy, who had been recruited by Democrats when he was a Republican to run as a Democrat in a safe blue district that they didn't want to get too liberal.
That's right. Well, they achieved that goal.
In 2020, he was challenged in the primary by a rather lovely lady named Melanie Dorigo. Melanie is a very nice person, a very genuinely good person, one of the people I would call one of the good liberals. Mm-hmm. Someone who really wants to do good, who really does a lot to do good, and who really tries hard to do good, but who is also stuck in this world where people owe each other shit. And doesn't want to break out of it because, she feels she benefits from it too. And she probably does some, but she doesn't benefit as much from it as she thinks she does. And she could benefit more. But anyway, I'm getting way too into the weeds. The point is, she would have been a much better choice from any progressive point of view than Tom Swatsy in that congressional seat.
Yeah.
And, she was totally ignored by mainstream media or the serious people around, as they thought of themselves, around Bernie Sanders and AOC.
Well,
and was allowed to lose to Tom Swatsy when, this is like the absolute sort of blue district that progressives should be investing in because they're the exact districts that the Democratic Party had been deliberately planting conservatives in to keep them from getting too liberal.
That's right.
Yeah, I just wonder whatever's become of our progressive wing. It's not much of it left.
Well, she's one of the people who was who had started to be quiet and behave themselves for Joe Biden, who's now very angry again because now that Kamala Harris lost.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, look,
there are lots of problems. I still like Melanie. If she ran tomorrow in another congressional race, even though I don't have anything to do with Democratic Party politics, I would support her just to make Tom Swatsy spend more money on the primary out of that kind of pettiness.
I don't know if that even works anymore.
Oh, it does, as witnessed by all the money consultants are making.
Well, yeah. But I don't know what it does for anything. I mean, he wins, loses, he goes off and becomes a lawyer for some lobbying firm.
That's the thing. The reason that George Santos won was because in 2022, he decided not to run for re-election because he was going to run for governor.
I know.
And that did, probably with the plans of running for Senate not too long after that. And that totally blew up in his face. His governorship, his bid for governor failed. He did succeed in dragging Kathy Hochul to the right, maybe, but Kathy Hochul was a right-wing corporate Democrat anyway.
I think what really dragged Kathy Hochul all the way over to the right was the fact that, most of her money comes from Rochester-based real estate.
Yeah, that's probably it.
And they were investing.
The 300 National Guardsmen to the subway is
750.
Pretty sick again. 750 now, yeah. It was 300 the first time.
Don't cut it. She's really upped it. It's 750. If you've ever been to
she wants to make the CEO on the subway feel safe.
She owns that guy. MTA is a government worker. She just
no. She wants to make the CEO she believes is riding the subway feel safe.
Which one is that?
I don't know. She gave a counseling session to 175 of them and paid state money for it.
I know, but they all live out on Long Island and fly.
She seems to believe they're riding the subway in Manhattan.
I thought that was her technique to make it safer for us, us average folk.
That was what she claimed when she sent the 300 the first time.
But
the 750 have been sent coincidentally right after a CEO was shot in Manhattan.
I thought it was to save us from being knifed as we brought our packages out of Macy's.
But I think it's to save us from being murdered by the next Luigi, the way poor David Thompson was murdered.
Yeah, he might confuse me for a CEO.
You've got to see somebody on the subway is going to shoot some other guy on the subway thinking they're a CEO, yes.
Well, could he claim he's a crazy CEO of color and he was trying to save the other ones? Because that seems to work. As long as it's someone who's not white and kind of acting crazy, he might be able to get away with it.
Well, you don't even have to kill anybody in that situation. They don't even have to try to kill anybody in that situation. They can just say, he looked like he was going to kill a CEO, so I choked him to death.
That's right. I mean, there you go.
I just don't know what I would have done with myself if somebody had gotten hurt. Dude, you killed someone. Someone got hurt.
I'm just saying, maybe that's the new thing. Maybe that's what they're protecting us from. That crazy CEO that goes nuts on the train thinking that he's Santa Claus giving out gifts. He's giving out gifts.
Giving out gifts on the subway would be illegal under New York's laws about feeding the less well off.
But that's the best thing, right? We got a mayor down in New York City who's got federal indictments. And
is trying to look like a Law and Order guy by standing behind Luigi during the perp walk.
I got him.
You're being perp. I don't like to pound on the liberal felon tropes, but the mayor of New York, who is charged with multiple felonies. The mayor of New York, who is charged with multiple felonies, more counts, more individual counts against Eric Adams in federal court than against Luigi Mangione in state court, even though they managed to find 12 charges to throw at him.
Yeah.
There's still more indictments on Eric Adams than Luigi, and he's standing there looking like a cop during the perp walk.
Once a cop, always a cop.
That's true. And of course, the only reason he is indicted is because he's not a cop anymore. If he were still a cop, he would not be indicted.
It's very, very difficult to find people who stay on the up and up when they are put in such close proximity to money and power.
I'll be totally honest. The only cops I've ever met who I ever liked are whistleblowers who got drummed out of the force for blowing the whistle.
Yeah, I had a brother-in-law who lived in Dallas for many years before he passed, who was a cop for most of his life. He was a decent enough guy. I mean, I didn't smoke my pot around him or nothing. I didn't trust him that much.
And wise.
But on the whole, he went out every day. Sure. He was a working-class guy from eastern Texas up around Paris. And served the public in whatever way he could for 25, 30 years. All in all, not a bad guy. But he's working for people that, I would prefer him not working for.
Legalism is such a great topic. Because you hear people say all the time, well, he broke the law.
So do I.
But it's just, you see people say that he broke the law. He broke the law. You see lots of people on immigration who want to act like they're not racist and say, it's not that I don't think that they should come here, it's that there's a legal way to come here and they broke the law.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, so what do you think the law means? Which brings us to all these. Now, in the root, the earliest legal political morality was developed in imperial China. I'm sorry, pre-imperial China. And it was called legalism. And legalism was the idea that because the leader enjoyed the mandate of heaven, that whatever the leader decided was just and moral, and therefore the law was just and moral because the leader said this is the law. And that was as deep as it went, because it was self-evident that as long as the leader enjoyed the mandate of heaven, the law was good and moral, because the gods only blessed good and loyal leaders. And this became the moral basis for the forced labor program that built the Great Wall of China under the first emperor, who while he himself was not thrown out, his son was thrown out because they thought, well, maybe he lost the mandate of heaven with that forced labor program.
Yeah, forced labor goes back a ways, don't it?
Obviously, he forced the wrong people into labor.
And so anyway, that dynasty fell, and Confucianism was developed to try to put some sort of actual ethical principles on government. And we can argue, and that's a whole nother show in and of itself. But what we see in so many Western settings is what breaks down to what the early Chinese philosophers were saying. The people in charge are morally right because they're in charge, and therefore the law is morally good because it's the law. Things that are legal are good, and things that are illegal are bad.
That is very true.
Yeah.
And that's no basis for a society. Because who's making the laws and who's deciding what should and shouldn't be legal?
Oh, sure.
I mean, until relatively recently, it was difficult to find anyone who even bought into the concept that your average citizen, if you want to call them that, was deserving of any kind of political power, thought, or consideration at all, period. They were to be used, they were to be exploited, and that's what happened to most of them.
And
that goes all the way back to the founding of civilization.
Well, ironically, that's not what anthropology tells us, but that's another show too. What's actually funny is that the first cities, according to the anthropologists, as opposed to the economists who want a different story, and the historians who listen to the economists because they don't trust the anthropologists, despite the anthropologists having the hard evidence. The actual way it worked is the people who established and organized cities appear to have been operating on an egalitarian basis, but that someone would then come in from outside, take over the city, and establish a hierarchy in order to protect their authority after taking over.
Yeah, that gets way back before you get to history time.
Well, this is where they're talking about, the historical record of artifacts in the earliest cities anybody's been able to find anywhere.
Yeah, I was about to say, I mean, you got to almost go to an archaeologist, maybe through the eyes of an anthropologist.
But the economist would tell us that the city grew up as a nexus of trade between farmers who needed to trade stuff with each other because they have to to do something with their product. No, the cities is were the easiest place for everyone to live in one place, so they could bring all the food to one place to share it equitably. And that was apparently the only real reason for the establishment of cities, to be able to have a central place to equitably share food. And then somebody else comes along and says, I can make money off of this, and takes over.
Well, that's why one of the main goddesses in Eastern Mediterranean area was, the goddess of the storehouse. Mm-hmm. That was what was important to everyone.
Yep.
You had to put the food up, and you had to protect it. Outside, there were raiders and other known dangers.
Yep.
For a long part of that time period, it was, I think, believed by the average guy on the street, maybe even the average, priest on the street, if there was such a thing.
Well,
but eventually it evolved into a caste system.
Well, yes, exactly.
Not a formal caste system, but certainly a segregated way of looking at people.
The way it seems to have worked in a cycle throughout history is community builds something. Group that is not part of the community that built something, historically represented in recent history by white people, but before that, more universally, people came along who didn't build something and took it over. And when you didn't build something and you took it over, you have to have a way of maintaining control of all the people who can still build that stuff if you want to benefit from it.
Yeah.
The most obvious
thing happened with the scribes. Once people learn to write, they control the scribes.
The most obvious place you can see this happen is in history is during the long replacement of the Roman Empire by monarchies ruled by families that used to be barbarian chiefs that overthrew the Roman Empire. Where they have two sets of laws, one for themselves and one for the Romans. And the Romans follow the Roman law and the barbarians follow the barbarian law. And so they maintain this hierarchy where they let the Romans have their law and keep following it, but then the barbarian law trumps the Roman law, and the barbarians outrank the Romans in every way that matters. And this is how you continue to enjoy the good things of urbanism for longer than you would have been able to enjoy them if the intelligentsia responsible for maintaining the city was allowed to just run off somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one reason Genghis Khan hated cities so much. I mean, he did some terrible things to people who live behind city walls.
But at the same time, he also maintained those cities' laws and protected their religions and let them do their own thing as long as they listened to whoever he put in charge of them, and that person followed his law. It's that same two-tiered system again.
Yeah. And he did that with some cities. Some of them he just sacked outright.
Some he just destroyed and, kill all the guys, sell all the women and children into slavery.
I don't know how he made such decisions, but...
the classic decision was, did they piss me off or not? Is
that kind of how Trump rules? Do they piss me off or not?
I mean, traditionally that's been the way it worked. The Greeks had what they called the First Sacred War, where the people of the town where the Delphic Oracle was located started trying to set rules and charge money and set up a political entity of their own and, use the Delphic Oracle to establish their own place in the political scheme of Greece. And the established Greek city-states didn't like that, and so they accused the town of sacrilege, and the organization in charge of running the religious organization in charge of running the Olympic Games declared war on this town, and they killed everybody and sold everybody who survived being killed into slavery and destroyed the town.
Yeah.
Because
and it's pretty amazing too, because later on those same slaves were serving wine to people in Greece.
Well, what's really ironic is that their form of slavery had its own class system within it, because it consisted of like 60%, 70% of the population.
Yeah.
All the people who did any sort of wage labor were either slaves or freedmen, for the most part. And the citizens, so all the people in wage labor were either slaves or ex-slaves. And then you had another class above that of people who were the born children of freedmen or foreign immigrants or the children of foreign immigrants. And they formed a second class, and they generally tended to fill all the mercantile roles in a city, merchants and tradespeople, a step above the wage labor. And then you had the citizens, who mostly, unless they were in genteel poverty of some kind, which happened, mostly owned land and collected rents and lived off all of this other stuff.
Yeah, well, the whole landowning, collecting of rents kind of thing is
so
the basis of
Athenian democracy was extremely democratic when it came to the rights of the individual citizen, but the individual citizen was part of a privileged ruling class that benefited from the taxes of the mercantile class, who did not have citizen rights and were freedmen and foreigners, and the working class, who were slaves or freedmen. Now, because most slaves were paid a wage, if you were fortunate enough not to be in an industry like agriculture or mining, you had a good chance of becoming a freedman. You were eventually going to buy your freedom. If you worked in agriculture or mining, you had a lifespan of less than 5 years.
Yeah, I was about to say, you didn't live long in a mine back in those days.
Again.
Yeah.
And it was the agricultural slaves and the mine slaves that ultimately was the condemnation of slavery as a whole, because it was absolutely horrific for the worst off. But that every system has remained absolutely horrific for the worst off.
So, guys, got a question for y'all. We're talking about working class and slavery and stuff like that from a long time ago. There are things I've seen going on in this country that looks like, to me anyway, the so-called middle class. I mean, maybe my dad was middle class, and maybe I am too. But it sure seems to me like the middle class is losing ground fast, and there does not seem to be an obvious good way right now to organize and to turn back the oligarchy that's been arising for years, but is showing its ugly head big time right now.
I'm glad you're talking about this, because the middle class is a phrase people love to use.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to pin down what it means. And
I've always been confused on it, you know.
When you really talk about, I mean, the middle class means people who graduated from college. That's what one person might tell you. Mm-hmm. People who graduated from college, because they earn a salary instead of being paid wages. And that's another way to put it, is in Japan, there is a clear class division between the wage laborer, and the salaryman. And the salaryman has a set of privileges in the corporate aristocracy that the wage laborer does not, as long as he fulfills his responsibilities. It's never quite been that cut and dried in the American system. And it's all come down to, well, do you own your house, or do you have a college degree, or are you quote unquote middle income, or all these other very sometimes painful constructs when people try to define the middle class.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons I did bring it up, is like, when my dad was born, he was basically a peasant rice farmer.
Yeah.
My whole family was, but, in Louisiana.
Now, Mark.
But eventually he got a job. He found a good company. He worked his way into, at least from a money standpoint, it seemed to me he reached middle class.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the first one in our family to ever hit college.
Yeah.
Okay, ever. On either side of the families, as far back as we can.
Joe Biden.
Yeah, well, Joe Biden wasn't around when I was attending college.
No, he's also he likes to talk about being the first person of his family to go to college. So much so that he copied a British politician's speech about the subject.
Yeah.
Welsh,
as far as I'm concerned. How do you find a job like that? I fell into mine. I wasn't looking for it.
Well, Joe Biden was the first person to go to college because his father became a successful car dealer who was able to pay him a good enough tutor to be able to get just barely good enough grades to get into the University of Delaware. In a day when state universities did not have the same prohibitive grade point average requirements for entry that they often can now. Joe Biden would not have gotten into the University of Delaware today. His grades wouldn't have been up to snuff even for the state university. But they were just good enough to get into the pre-Reagan state university system, which was very good at giving an education to white people, and which was destroyed when it started to show that it was also good at giving an education to black people.
Oh my God.
This should be remembered. Anything that benefits white people will be destroyed by the ruling class when it benefits black people too.
Or poor.
Yeah, but that's what I was going to ask. What for?
The poor, there's two ways you can kill it, right? You can either say it benefits too many poor people or too many people who are black and poor. Then it's
and the best thing is that all the people who target poor people now used to just openly target black people. But because of changes in the law, they now have to target white people too to be able to say they're not racist.
That's true.
And so they target the poor because by the numbers, the black population will be hurt worse by laws targeting the poor than the white population. And so those of us who are hurt by laws that are meant to hurt black people because we don't fall into the right income bracket are just, the proof that the racists aren't racist anymore. There are other class reasons for it too, but it was easier to maintain those class divisions when white supremacy was more obvious and overt, which is why you see so many right-wingers clamoring to bring it back.
That's true.
Because overt white supremacy makes it easier to win over the people who think they can be overseers.
Do you think people just like to feel superior on some kind of level?
So if you want to look at it in the vulgar Marxist sort of point of view, to steal a phrase from Ben Burgess, if you want to look at it from the vulgar Marxist point of view, if you make someone an overseer, they will now believe that their interests align with yours as the boss rather than their fellow employees. And now you have someone who can hold the whip for you and make you look like the good guy when you tell him to stop, if you're the owner. And that's where it comes down to originally, is that there was a system of indentured servitude that in place in the American colonies that had not yet become formal slavery in the same way it had in Portugal and Spain already, when something called Bacon's Rebellion happened. And I don't want to idealize Bacon's Rebellion too much, because it's important to remember that ultimately, while they wanted to take power from the plantation-owning class, the rebels did not want to take their plantations and divide it up among themselves. They wanted to take over the government so they could attack indigenous people and take over more indigenous land so that they could live the same lifestyles as the plantation-owning class. And this made a difference in the first place, that this motivation, that they wanted to be richer as opposed to just they didn't want to be poor anymore, ended up dividing them. But it started out as class unity. All the indentured servants, white and black, got together under the leadership of a local politician, a ruling class guy named Nathaniel Bacon, who organized them to take over the government and did so successfully. And they might have won in the end if he had not died of dysentery and before the uprising was over.
Happens all the time.
You know, this is one of the reasons why I say that a lot of the advances of medical science have done more to help people than capitalism has. You already have sort of this prototypical class rebellion led by a ruling class guy who's siding with the less fortunate. And then he gets sick and dies. I mean, modern medicine would have really helped.
Yes, it would have.
How many people die of diarrhea anymore?
Not like they used to, that's for sure.
Not like they used to.
Holy cow. I remember from being a kid, there were still people out around the country dying of diarrhea.
Yep. Get dehydrated.
Yeah, it wasn't that uncommon. And it was hard to get pure water.
That's why.
I've been around Louisiana much, but there ain't a lot of good drinking water laying about the ground.
That's why cholera outbreaks were such a big deal in Western arid climates, where the water was important to not die from other things.
Come on, RFK is going to fix all that for you.
One of the big reasons you started cholera is going to come back under RFK Jr., man,
and typhus.
Oh,
I mean, honestly, RFK Jr. seems to really be caping for a polio comeback.
That's why I'm investing in iron lungs. I think it's a growth industry.
The boy with the plastic story of the future and not just the past.
That's right. Not just quack, not just for, I'm going to start selling it online, get your own iron lung, good for the building up your strength in case of polio and everything else.
Hey, well, as a guy who still smokes, I might be in the market for one.
There was I can't remember who it was. There was a World War II senator who had to take his iron lung breaks because he was a polio survivor.
I mean, it's not something to be joking about, but I mean, he's crazy about vaccines.
He's totally crazy about vaccines because he's totally crazy about things like raw milk for the same reason, because he has this stupid idea, which, I mean, if you look at Robert F. Kennedy, you can tell why he has this stupid idea. He's joined the stupid fitness cult and he's a gung-ho weightlifter and shit like that. And you can tell from those awful pictures with his shirt off where he's in much better skeletal musculature than a man his age should. Sorry, thank you.
You mean steroids?
Probably, but that's beside the point.
It's always these guys that are always healthy, like Arnold Schwarzenegger all through the 80s. I've never taken
Arnold Schwarzenegger was never healthy. It's really important to understand that Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 90s had elective heart surgery. Now, you have to understand what elective heart surgery means, because people don't understand what elective heart surgery means.
It means if I don't get it, I lose
in the capitalist economy. Yes. Elective heart surgery specifically means I can afford to have a doctor who gives me regular checkups, who sends me in to get an expensive test that not everybody's insurance covers, that tells me that I need surgery or I'll die before I will actually die. And then I can get that surgery before I actually have a stroke or a heart attack.
Yeah.
Elective surgery is necessary surgery that hasn't resulted in symptoms yet.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a privilege of wealth. If Arnold Schwarzenegger were a poor weightlifter who never made it,
he'd just be dead.
He would have become a professional wrestler and died and had a much higher chance of dying in his 50s or 60s.
Maybe he would have just been another son of Hercules. You know,
there's a story. There is an educational story that I call on everyone to study, to teach people about branding and capitalism and how people will keep trying to sell the same shit until it works. In the 1970s, there was a professional wrestler named Superstar Billy Graham. Now, Superstar Billy Graham, and the reason you're laughing at that name is because it was chosen for the most ridiculously obvious, three ridiculously obviously reasons possible.
Jesus Christ, Superstar.
Number one, the guy who became Superstar Billy Graham really had been a bodybuilder who really competed in what was the predecessor to Mr. Universe. He was somebody who worked out with Arnold Schwarzenegger before Arnold Schwarzenegger was a big star. He was somebody who made a big deal about the weightlifting contests he participated in as a professional wrestler. But at the same time, in addition to being a real bodybuilder guy who was physically fit and talked about his fitness and health, he also really had been a revival preacher for a little while. And because he really had been a revival preacher a little while, he put together this routine that say your prayers and take your vitamins. That was extremely, extremely telegenic for him. But at the time, wrestling just wasn't a big thing. And so while he made a good living off of this, he never became rich or famous.
What year was that?
It's 1970s.
70s.
Even the name Billy Graham, this is the third reason, he joined an act, a kayfabe act, kayfabe being fake in a sort of weird pig Latin code, called the Fighting Grahams, who were a wrestling tag team, who were not really brothers, but who claimed to be brothers and cousins and such, though they were not.
Like the Ramones.
The Ramones?
Yeah, there was
like
guy who was actually
in the family. Yes, like the Ramones. Unlike the later Rougeau brothers, who really were brothers. But so they were kayfabe brothers. They all had different last names, but they all used the name Graham. He came in as the youngest brother, Billy. Billy being a common younger brother stereotype name, but also with the deliberate joke that they were cashing in on the name Billy Graham, and that he and going with the fact that he had been a revival preacher. So, and a few years later in the 1980s, this whole act was recycled by a man now known as Hulk Hogan.
Really?
And became hugely successful.
Oh, that's true.
And Hulk Hogan reaped the brand success that had been established before him by this guy, Billy Graham, who just hadn't gone national because when he was in the then WWF, 3 W's, it was a regional act and not a national corporation.
So I wonder how much
the efforts of the founder's son, Vince.
Well, sometimes that happens.
Vince is a horrible human being who is bad at professional wrestling, even as he was good for the bottom line of his company.
He is. Unfortunately, I have to duck out.
I think everybody needs to go now. That said, I appreciate you guys hanging in with us.
It was a great time I had.
I'm glad we didn't talk as much about what I intended to. I'll do a little bit of a monologue about that, I think, after you guys go. But do either of you guys have anything to promote or plug before you go, Connor? Since you're under pressure.
No, I do not. But I just want to thank everyone for having me here. It was great fun. See you in a couple months or so, maybe. If I have anything new.
I hope to see you again sooner than that, but thank you for committing to coming back. Take care. Yeah. Charles, do you have anything to promote or plug?
Well, I do, but it's only what you already promote and plug, and that's the dissemination of information. So I'm happy with that.
No, I think that's a good idea. I try to bring people conversations to disseminate that information every week when I can.
Well, I believe, like Socrates did, that talking with things in a more public forum helps to bring that about.
And I want to have people come watch other people talk so they can have something to talk about through the week. So I hope folks have been watching. If you want to watch more, you can catch up on previous episodes, Patreon, Eclectic Radical. That's also where people can donate to support the show if they want. If someone wants to follow on Twitter or Blue Sky, that's also Eclectic Radical.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to join the mailing list on Substack, that's also Eclectic Radical. And if somebody wants to give a one-time donation on Cash or PayPal, that is also Eclectic Radical. I've tried to make everything easy for people. I do not get money anywhere from people who donate directly to the Patreon. So if you want to pay me, that's where to do it.
Well, you might talk me out of a few bucks there, but I'm going to take my leave and let you do your solo. No, I like supporting people that I follow.
And I appreciate that. That's not my intention, but I appreciate
I buy books from the authors I follow. I watch the movies of the guys I follow.
I do feel like the work that I'm doing is worth being paid for. That's why I give people a place to do it. I also understand that not everybody who watches the show can afford to help support it. And I don't want to feel like it's mandatory or that people who support the show are getting special treatment. Though obviously I appreciate everyone who supports the show. And I do write some stuff just for people who pay me on Patreon when I can motivate myself to do so.
All righty, dude. Well, I'm going to take my leave then and let you do your monologue.
You have a great day and a great week, and I'll tweet at you. And take care, Charles. Thanks.
Take care, man.
And folks, for everybody who's still with us, I want to thank you for tuning in and apologizing for getting off topic. I will say, monologue-wise, that as the year wraps up, and, Time Magazine named Donald Trump their Person of the Year, I would say that if I had to name a single Person of the Year, I could not do it. The people who have mattered in 2024 are a lot of people whose names are not remembered and who sadly aren't compiled on a written list anywhere for anybody to easily follow. You'd have to look them up on places like Twitter and in individual news stories. Folks who have died in Gaza or the West Bank, or Lebanon or Syria now as 2024 comes to an end. Folks who have died of COVID despite the pandemic allegedly being over. Folks who have been shot by cops in even larger numbers than in previous years. The people who continue to die despite the efforts of harm reduction to save them, according to the Democrats who tell us they're reducing our harm. And now Trump is coming back, and any pretense of harm reduction is out the window. And it's going to get visibly worse from the point of view of people who felt like they could protect themselves from reality while Biden was president, and Democrats could, theoretically stop the worst things Republicans might do. Now, we're coming up into a period where Democrats are once again going to need to stop the worst things Republicans might do. And they're talking about working with Trump to find out what things they can compromise on doing together, none of which are likely to benefit the marginalized people Trump ran against, or the working class people that Trump tried to convince he might do something, he might help somehow if the status quo changed because he was running against the establishment. Surprise, he's really not. You can see that with all the billionaire donors he's putting in his cabinet this time around. That really cements who stands to gain the most from the Trump presidency, just like the Biden presidency or a potential Harris presidency. The same people are going to be cashing the same checks at our expense under the Republicans as under the Democrats. We're just going to see more blatant right-wingers grift off of it at the same time. And that's what the Democrats really don't like, having to share space with those annoying right-wingers when they're trying to run their own grifts. And we can do better than either. But the only way we can do it is to start divesting ourselves from Republicans, from Democrats, from companies that support Israel, from companies that support the military-industrial complex. We have to not support them with our money. We have to not support them with our work. We have to be able to find ways to break out. And that's entirely dependent on mutual aid programs to create ways to take care of ourselves and each other, and community defense programs to protect those forces from the violent state monopoly of force that the ruling class will turn against them if we try to survive without the ruling class. So we need to be doing hard work and talking to people about communism at work or on our way to work, and not just thinking about it. We need to be organizing to help each other if we can. We need to be organizing to help others if we can. If we can afford to, we need to be doing mutual aid work ourselves, supporting independent media. If we can do the work in independent media, we need to be talking about communism, talking about anarchism, explaining why capitalism is the problem. Because there's not a solution as two parties pass the blame back and forth and benefit from it every 4 years. There's not a benefit from one party gaining a monopoly on power for 8 years. There's not even a benefit to divided power for 8 years or 10 years anymore, because we get gridlock when we have divided power, and during that gridlock, nobody notices the little bad things that do get passed that slowly make things worse. And instead we pretend we're incrementally making things better. And the focus on national politics has made us all forget the struggle for the freedom of the city against a purely local fascism that wants to drive out homeless people and working class people and retired people and marginalized people. And we need to struggle more and vote less, or at least vote smart rather than more, because in the short term, electoral politics are not going to change anything past the local level. And in the long term, nothing's going to change electorally unless they're afraid of us being able to deny them our money and our work. And that's where we are. And so we need to keep working towards being able to deny them our money and our work. And until we're able to do that, it's not going to change. And we need to be able to change it, which means we need to believe that we can divest. We need to believe that we can strike. We need to believe that we can organize. And we need to do it. There's no hero who's going to do it for us. That ship has flown, and that's where we are. And that's the thought I want to leave you with. It's why I believe folks who can should support mutual aid, support this show, support other independent media not taking corporate money. We need to be able to divest. And thank you, everyone. I will see you next week, and I will tweet at you.